The next line is, where have we gone now? 91. এমনি করে হৃদয়ে হৃদয়ে মোর তীব্র দহন জালো। In my heart,
তুমি এই করেছো ভালো, তীব্র দহন জালো, আমার কোনো কষ্ট হবে না, এইটাই আমার পক্ষে ভালো। এই করেছো তুমি, ঈশ্বরকে বলছেন এই তুমি ভালো করেছো।
through that, through that we realize. That's the only way of realizing. So you've done well, cruel one, to have given me this incident in my life, this whatever happened in my life. So many various angles. Okay, just going back to a different subject altogether. This is number 99. আবার এসেছে আষাঢ়। Okay. আবার এসেছে আষাঢ়। Okay. Going back to a different season of nature, the monsoons. And so again, another manifestation, because for Rabindranath, of course, the monsoons was one of the most fertile. It is the most fertile season, and he has so many songs written about the rains. And finally, just to kind of give you a different experience altogether, because we've talked about love, we've talked about the different aspects of God and divinity. Let me take you to number 106. And you will be, you know it already, but you will be surprised how relevant this is. You know which one I'm talking about? Which poem in the Gitanjali? Hemor Chitto. Hemor Chitto Punno Tirthe. Okay. What I will do is, this is a very long song. In fact, those of you who have Gitanjali at home, I would recommend that you go back to the book or the Rachana Boli, find the book there, and you will find that this poem is the longest poem. It has 5 long stanzas. In this fine print in the Rachana Boli, it occupies 3 pages, the longest. So obviously he felt that it is a very important poem. He did not convert all 5 stanzas into song, but he composed a song with the same title in 3 stanzas. And many of you have heard that. What I will do, I made a rushed translation into English of it. I'll just read out my own English translation. Forgive the, it's mainly, it is in prose actually, but this is so that you understand what he is saying and how relevant it is. O my consciousness, awake gently in pilgrim purity, tirtho, in pilgrim purity, on this seashore of India's great Shagorotire, Mahamanober. Standing here, I bow to man's gods, both arms outstretched. In noble rhythms, supreme joy, I hymn their praise. I am deliberately changing things or interpreting here, because he talks about Noro Devota. And Noro Devota literally is man's god, but Devota could also be plural. Why not? And because the minute I use man in English, it would have to be he. I've chosen the plural, man's gods, so that I can skip to their praise. I hymn their praise. Now you see how different it becomes. In a language like English, we have to translate according to the system. But I like this plurality. Um, these dhyana deep mountains, wildernesses holding river rosaries, Nodir Jopmala, here the sacred earth forever see on this seashore of India's great humanity. That's the first stanza. Second stanza, no one, this is the song, no one knows whose call made streams of so many populations come from where on turbulent currents lost themselves in an ocean. Think about this. Here Aryans, here non-Aryans, here Dravidians, Chinese, Shakas, Huns, Pathans, Mughals, dissolved in one body. The doors open to the west today. All bring gifts from there. Give and take, meet and merge. No one turns away on this seashore of India's great humanity. The final stanza, come, O Aryans, come, non-Aryans, Hindus, Muslims, come today, come, you English, come, come, Christians, come, Brahmins, cleanse the mind, hold the hands of everyone. Come, O fallen, may the load of all insult be undone. Come, come quick to Ma's consecration. The auspicious pitcher hasn't yet filled, with pilgrim water sanctified by the touch of every body today. On this seashore of India's great humanity today. So, he knew what he was dealing with, and we are dealing with that now, today. This is really a call almost to action. This has nothing to do with God. If anything, it has to do with many gods, because he mentions the religions. But everyone is together. Everyone must be united in one body. And he's saying this. And so far in all the discourse that I've been reading, I have not found anybody referring to Hemor Chitto so far in contemporary times. So this is the Gitanjali in the original. That was poem 106, and it carries on, as I said, to poem 157, but we are not going to deal with that any longer. Let me now tell you what happened with the English translation. Because after 1910, Rabindranath was very exhausted, and he was also very unwell in 1911. And in fact, he said that he told people, he wrote to people that I just can't get anything creative out at this time. And it's at that time that he began to just, as he says, as a kind of relaxation, as a kind of recovering from his illness, he begins to translate various poems into English from Bangla. He had done one or two before, but now he really does it in full earnest. And when he translates these, he is translating them, he realizes that this is impossible to render into English. Because he's such a master, he's such a master of rhyme, meter, the content, the word, the word play, also everything together, what can be done. So he just writes in English in prose, what becomes known as prose poetry. Now, prose poetry has been there in English before in the 19th century, but Rabindranath is one of the best examples of English prose poetry. And then he goes to England in 1912, and he carries this manuscript of many of the poems that he's translated with him. And then he shows it to some of his friends over there. They're very impressed. And these are the Englishmen who are reading the manuscript. They are really very impressed. This is 1912, 1913. And they say Rabindranath is on his way to the United States because his son Rothindranath is studying over there. He is going to take a ship to the US and spend most of 1912, 1913 with his son in the United States. His friends in London say, please leave this behind. We think it should be published. So he says, all right, okay, fine. He was very, Rabindranath was a very self-critical person. He didn't think he did anything properly. Can you imagine? He was always revising his own writings. That's the mark of someone who thinks that I haven't written this well enough first time round. I have to correct myself. And very often he used to write saying that I haven't written this very well. We know that he did. Meanwhile, in London, that famous story you've heard about, he was carrying the manuscript in his bag and he was in the tube and he misplaced the bag. He forgot to pick up his bag and he left the train and he lost the manuscript. Can you imagine the Gitanjali manuscript? Luckily for him, the lost and found in the London metro had located that bag and it was there. And so when they came back, I don't know whether it was he himself or somebody else, they said, this is your bag, right? Isn't it? Yes, it is. So the manuscript was found again. And the manuscript was published in 1912, first edition in London. W.B. Yeats saw it, was very impressed. He wrote the introduction. And those of you who have read the English introduction will realize how totally overwhelmed Yeats was by this experience. Yeats himself was religious, and at that time, before the First World War, Europe was going through a lot of spiritual crisis, and this kind of poetry appealed to many of them. So when the book came out, it came out in the first edition in 1912, then Macmillan took it up for a mass publishing edition, mass published edition in 1913. That came out in early 1913. And in November 1913, suddenly out of the blue, the Nobel Prize award is announced. Announced to whom? To Rabindranath Tagore. Who? You understand? This is not Bengal. Even in Bengal, people didn't know Rabindranath so much at that time. This is in England, in Europe, in New York, where they didn't know who was Tagore. Tagore, of course, was the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize. And immediately, on the basis of what? Just this one book, Gitanjali. There was no other English text of Tagore's available. Nowadays, the Nobel Prize is given to somebody who has a huge output already, proven. This is just on the basis of one book. And let me read out some funny extracts from some of the reporters. In announcing the award on the 14th of November 1913, the New York Times commented, "It is the first time that this prize has been given to anybody but a white person." New York Times. Okay. Fine, we know. The next day, the same New York Times, in an editorial, wrote, "Some of us feel a surprise more than faintly tinged with resentment at the award of the Nobel Prize for Literature that passes over all Western writers and falls on a Hindu bard with a name hard to pronounce and harder to remember." New York Times. And then he goes on to say, Babindranath Tagore. They wouldn't know the difference, right? So, misspelled, B-A-B. Babindranath Tagore, if not exactly one of us, is, as an Aryan, a distant relation of all white folk. Moreover, though of Eastern birth, he is of Western education. He wasn't at all. Tagore hated school. He read a lot, of course, but certainly not Western education. And though he is said to write his verses first in Sanskrit, where did they get this information from? Somebody said that he, because Bengali, who knows Bangla in 1913? He must have written in Sanskrit, right? Which seems queer, that being a language now spoken by nobody. That he's absolutely right. He translates them into good sound English before submitting them to the large public. This is New York Times. And of course, this is just, it is funny, but it's there. It was printed. And then, of course, the Tagore fad, the fashion completely took over. He became a celebrity, international celebrity, because of the Gitanjali. The funny thing is that because of the English Gitanjali, the translations that went into most of the other languages, including in India, were from English. So the early other Indian language Gitanjalis are also prose poetry, because somebody second-hand translated from the English Gitanjali. And many of the other European languages also had similar. But nobody seemed to mind. Everyone thought that this was the message that is required of the day. And there are people who will swear, although we will think that nowadays that particular English style is a little outdated, a lot of people swear that, it moved me so much in that generation, that they kept the copy with them for the rest of their lives and always went back to that copy, even though we know, those of us who are interested in translation studies realize that very often Rabindranath would not translate the whole poem. He would condense, he would of course render it into prose, and he would sometimes bring in additional things. So those of us who are very kind of, finicky and fussy will say that, oh, no, this is not the true Gitanjali. But it won the Nobel Prize, and everybody across the world accepted it. So it must have some importance. It moved them. So that's the funny story behind the English Gitanjali. And in fact, another thing that most of you may not be aware of is that the English Gitanjali has only 103 poems, of which only 50 are from, 50 odd, I think it's 53 actually, are from the Gitanjali itself. The remaining 50 are from 9 other Bangla books of Rabindranath's. From Noibeddo, from Gitimallo was out by that time, from Khea, all kinds of other. So it's almost the English Gitanjali is almost a collection of Tagore's poems over the previous 10 years. So that's where the mind is without fear. That's in the English Gitanjali. It's not in the Bangla Gitanjali, because that original Bangla is in Noibeddo. So that's the interesting thing with reference to the English Gitanjali. Ultimately, in 1997, one person took on the challenge of translating the entire Bangla Gitanjali into English. He was a poet by the name of Joe Winter. He is a poet by the name of Joe Winter. He used to live in Kolkata. Some of you might even have met him, I don't know. He married a Bengali. Now he's gone back. He's much older now. He's gone back to England. And in fact, I have a few copies of his full Gitanjali of Tagore, which was published in 1997. So if you're interested in buying that, they're there for you. Because from start to finish, he translates into rhyme and meter, because he's a poet, he can do that, the original Bangla into English. Then in 2011, William Radice, you might have heard of William Radice, he did the same thing as well. So now there are 2 English Gitanjalis which have the Bangla Gitanjali fully translated into English, rhyme and metrical. Joe Winter in 97 and William Radice in 2011. That's a massive challenge. It's to get that kind of quality of a rhymed poem. We can't call them songs because no one has set them to music as yet in the West, but they should be. That was a huge challenge. By the way, it's interesting. The English Gitanjali, as I was saying, has a theme: spirituality, devotion, God. All of the English Gitanjali poems have that focus, even though they might have come from earlier Bangla books. But the Bangla Gitanjali doesn't have that much of a narrow focus. The Bangla Gitanjali is about all kinds of themes, and its sequence is chronological. Number 1 is the earliest. It was written, I think, in 1906, Bangla Gitanjali, the first of the poems, and goes right up till 1910, when the Bangla Gitanjali is published. Most of them are from 1909, 1910. In the English Gitanjali, Rabindranath has done a very interesting experiment. A lot of people don't realize this. The early poems in the English Gitanjali are about the soul or a person seeking union, fulfillment with God. The middle section is about the same person, whoever that is, finding union with God. Then there is a number of poems, the third section I call it, which is about fear, being frightened of death, because that's the next step in life, isn't it? And then the final fourth section is the soul is let free. The soul becomes eternal, moves beyond death into eternal life. That's the narrative of the English Gitanjali, which is not there in the Bangla Gitanjali. So enough of my talking. Now you please take over. Who wants to say something, interrogate? Yes, of course. Absolutely. You have the privilege.
So you said that the spirituality portion was not in the Bangla Gitanjali. So the person who translated it into English, he put it in himself, he created it himself, or how did it come into the, I mean, how did it make it different? You said the English Gitanjali is different to the Bangla Gitanjali. So how did that happen? Did they take the authority to create some poems themselves? The people who translated it too.
The first one is by Tagore himself.
Huh.
So when Tagore translated it himself, he took because it's his own poems, so he took as many liberties as he wanted. That's his own work.
It was originally Tagore's itself?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
He had done it himself. He had scribbled these lines while he was recuperating from his illness, then taken the manuscript to London in 1912.
Okay.
That's what happened with the first edition. Yes, Shamlu.
My personal view in life is also spiritual. And I'd like to understand from you the exact difference that you're trying to convey to us of spirituality being different from devotional faith.
Let me try to explain by maybe giving you an analogy. There may be many scientists who do not believe in God, right? There may be. There are many who do believe in God. I'm saying that because science trusts empirical, objective proof, many scientists do not believe in God. Many communists do not believe in God, right? Okay. Yet they may be spiritual. Spirituality meaning an exploration of the spirit, wherever that spirit resides. I don't know where it resides, okay? But inside us. A spiritual approach to life, which is secular and at the same time which does not necessarily have to believe in one God or any specific God. Whereas devotional religious poetry usually is addressed to a particular God. So spiritual is closer to philosophical, where it's all about ideas, intellectual endeavor, investigation, examination, but within, the spirit within, because we all know that we are body and spirit. Now, I don't think science as yet has actually found where the spirit is. But it's assumed that we have something like that, what you might call the soul. They're still trying to locate in science, right? Maybe one day they'll find it. It may be a power. I'm glad that you mentioned this, because even the so-called spiritual or even devotional poems in Gitanjali, it could be a force, it could be a power.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say.
It need not be. A scientist can well believe this, because they are looking for that power that puts everything together, that holds everything together, that creates everything. So he hasn't named it. He has not given the force a name. So you are free to choose whichever way you want to look at it.
I have already chosen it. My point was that spiritualism also believes in the fact that there was some power, some energy, some whatever, which
Right.
created the entire galaxy.
Yes.
How did it come into existence?
yes,
You know,
yes.
of course, then there are questions about where was space and who created
Yes,
space and so on.
yes,
But
yes.
my point is that if you believe in a creator, then that is spiritualism, isn't it?
Yes, of course.
Any creator or any superpower,
Yeah.
divine.
If you call the creator a capital C, then you're moving towards a divine figure. If
Yes,
you
sir.
just use a lowercase c, small c, then you're thinking of a force, a power.
Okay.
You don't have to name that.
You don't-
They're still searching.
Yes, yes.
Let's hope they find it within our lifetimes.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Shamlu. Yes.
From Upanishad we got it, it is the prana.
Yes.
That is the Atma.
Yes.
Atma is no form,
Yeah.
so it will not die. So it
Nahanyata.
convert to other form.
Yes.
Because it is like a dress our
Okay.
body. And
Absolutely.
the Atma is inside there.
Yeah.
So that is going on. Another thing is about Tagore. 2 days probably in America, in political, I forgot it a little bit, but that person mentioned Tagore's 2 poetry. Today.
Martin Sheen. Martin Sheen was
Yeah, Martin Sheen, right.
referred to
Exactly. So many
Where
things.
the Mind is Without
So
Fear.
many things.
And I think one of his, I think it was Joaquin Phoenix who got arrested because they were protesting. So you can use Tagore in protest as well. But your first point is very valid, because that, as we all know, but maybe I should become more explicit over here, Tagore knew the Upanishads, and a lot of commentators have said that Upanishadic philosophy underlies.
Exactly, as I fully,
Rabindranath.
as he was so
Rabindranath.
much involved with
Yes.
Upanishad
Yes.
in every
Absolutely.
aspect.
Yeah.
Another thing, this is my opinion, through poetry or anything, subconsciously it comes from the Upanishad, so much. And Ramon Ray, also Vivekananda, they are all are fond of or source of Upanishad. And that is the spirit of India. So I like to say a few more words.
Yes.
Another thing, I think India, after the independence, if we can try to follow our old that Upanishad basis to contemporary situation, okay, adaptation, but not like the Western industrial, I don't know, physical feelings. That is, I think it is not
Yeah.
Helpful. But
Yes. Yes, but you're absolutely right, because this is something that many in the young generations nowadays don't look at spirituality as something that is fashionable. You know, it's something that is very often disregarded. But yes, I mean, I'm sure many of you will agree with the opinion that he has put forth, that there is a need for this.
I think,
and
our education, that we got it, then I think will change. Because it is still, we are continuing our
Yes.
Sanatan.
of course,
It is continued inside, just to take it out.
yeah,
Young
absolutely.
generation, then we can also get it back.
Right. Thank you.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wants to join in the discussion? Feel free. Because after all, like Shamlu, I mean, you know this, we are all atoms, and as he said, atoms disperse, they reassemble, and there's some kind of force going on over there. Yes.
Thank you. Tagore's Tagore's teachings should be so widespread that it starts right from the schools all over the world. Like there's just this song, that Bipode more rokha koro e nahi mor prarthana.
We sang it.
Yeah, I missed that out. So I was thinking, the small things, these will sort of eradicate violence all over the world, That stop-এর মতন, stop part করার মতন করে যদি করা হয়, what is your view about that?
You know what? Tagore is not the only pacifist. He's not the only philosopher who has spoken about these things across the world. He is one of the best examples. And you are absolutely right that there should be more non-Western thinkers and authors and philosophers entering the education system in the West, which in fact many universities and colleges now do. They make a point of having non-Western thought also on their syllabi. But you're saying that it should trickle down into the school system. Absolutely right. Some schools do that too. In the West, they're very conscious of the fact that they should know more about the rest of the world. So non-Western cultures is something that is taught. I wish there was more of that in our system. Right? You do study Tagore in schools over here, but there needs to be more of this. They'll make their own decisions. But absolutely, because you see, what happens very often is, as a society, as a culture, India thinks that it's lagging behind because there is a certain developed world and we are still developing. So we need to catch up with the developed world, and the developed by definition are quote-unquote modern. We are still not modern or not fully modern. So how do we become modern and developed? Ape the developed world. That's not necessarily the best way to do it. Materialism, perhaps. Yes, yes. So what we are missing out on, I'm not saying, just like Tagore himself, he wanted the best of everything to come into Vishwabharati. Vishwabharati must be a nest where everyone, all birds can come together, like migratory birds, everyone, and the indigenous population. Ideas from everywhere are worthwhile. And there are brilliant ideas produced so many places all over the world. But here we neglect our own. That's where we should definitely give more space to these subjects and themes. You're right.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Actually, I have a confusion. I want that you throw some light on this. Once Rabindranath Tagore said, "বৈরাগ্য সাধনে মুক্তি সে আমার নয়." No Bengali can say that he or she has no relation with Rabindranath Tagore. We can't live without Rabindranath Tagore. He is everything in our life, our materials of thoughts. And no Bengali can say that he has not heard of Vivekananda. His guru, Ramakrishna Dev, sent him to Makali. You want, whatever you want, you will be granted by Makali. And he wanted the most treasure. মা আমাকে বিবেক দাও, বৈরাগ্য দাও, চেতনা দাও. So now I am on the horns of dilemma. When Vivekananda, the great personality, wanted মা আমাকে বিবেক দাও, বৈরাগ্য দাও, চেতনা দাও, in his assessment, this is the most treasured resource that he can get from the divine. And on the contrary, Rabindranath Tagore is saying, বৈরাগ্য সাধনে মুক্তি সে আমার নয়. Actually, it is my deficiency that I could not clarify myself. Please, you throw some light on this.
No. It's no one's deficiency, because this is part of the human predicament. And Tagore himself, I don't know whether you came in when we were discussing that. I mentioned that he was himself caught, because on the one hand he is writing these spiritual, devotional songs and poems. On the other hand, you are absolutely right. He said that deliverance is not for me in renunciation. Those are his English words. So where is
উপনিষদের
he?
কবি ছিলেন,
Hmm?
উপনিষদের কবি.
হ্যাঁ, এখন প্রশ্নটা হচ্ছে যে এরকম তো আমাদের নিজেদের মধ্যেই হয় না. We go through this all the time. One day we'll feel like this, the next day we'll feel completely opposite. So that doesn't mean that you have to have one or the other. Let me read out something to you, and this might also throw some light on the other question. Because of Rabindranath's belief in the Upanishadic point of view, I had in my own book written about the Isha Upanishad, the shortest Upanishad. In English translation, some of those lines go like this: the world is swaddled in the glory of God. God's manifestations all around. But it changes. Renounce it. Enjoy the wealth of the world with dispassion. Okay, enjoy it, but also renounce it. Do both. You are here, you've been given the Jagote Ananda Jogge. You are here, enjoy it. That doesn't mean that you luxuriate in physical, materialistic, but do what Rabindranath did. Get the joy from nature all around you, from love, from things that are in human life all around, but also you must eventually renounce it. And these can go hand in hand. Enjoy the wealth of the world with dispassion. Do not get attached. That's the main thing.
Does it mean that Vairagya, the meaning of Vairagya is differing with the different perspective?
Of course. I mean, any word that has any spiritual connotation will have different layers of meaning.
Then what did Tagore actually mean by Vairagya and Swamiji meant by Vairagya? What is the difference of perspective?
There can be completely different beliefs. Vairagya, if the idea is to be, leave things behind. If you are a Swamiji, you will leave things behind. But Rabindranath is not a Swamiji. Rabindranath is a Gurudev. Or a Kobi Guru. All right. So he is going to, in order to do his work, everybody has their own karma.
Then
I cannot be a carpenter because I wish I could, but I cannot do it. But I can maybe sing.
Then what did Rabindranath Tagore mean by this? Vairagya sadhane mukti amar noy. Actually, what did he want to indicate?
He is saying
if I be unifocused,
that he is not someone who will completely renounce and go into an ashram and become a Swamiji or a guru and just be an ascetic. He won't do that. He will live life through everything else that he sees, and he will continue to do what he can do best, which is being an artist, in every sense of the word artist. So all that he sees around him, he will try to convey through art.
So the philosophy is differing, no?
It's the same philosophy, it's not different. You don't have to become a Shamiji, you don't have to become a Kobi. Try to be both. Enjoy the wealth of the world with dispassion. Don't become, kind of acquisitive. But
Thank you.
enjoy what has been given to you. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if, I'm wondering if Gitanjali has been translated in other Indian languages.
Yes,
and
in
if,
every Indian language.
and if they have they been translated from English or Bengali?
I had talked about that a little while back. In the initial years, all of the translations, even in Indian languages, were done from English.
Okay.
And then later on, you have much more recent translations, which are direct from Bangla. Someone in Maharashtra who knows Bangla has directly translated into Marathi. So that has happened in more recent years. So every Indian language has a translation, good translation of Gitanjali. Yes, you had a question.
You've been a professor of English and, of course, in your practicing theatrics for a long time. Except for Tagore and Naipaul, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2001, that too not based out of India, has the English language, as per you, the wealth and depth of English literature or English language has not evolved that much to be able to have another Gitanjali, take another acclaim of a Nobel Prize? What could be a possible reason for that?
I don't think I am at all interested in whether another Nobel Prize goes to another Indian. That's the least of my concerns. I think we are much more interested in making India a peaceful country.
No,
prizes do not matter.
Right.
I mean, whether it's the Nobel Prize or whether it's the Grammy Awards or whether it's the Oscars, who cares? You make your own decision whether the work is worthy of your prize or not. Do not go by what the world tells you. I know I started off by saying Gitanjali Nobel Prize award, etc. Sometimes one has to do that because everybody knows it's in neon signs blaring at you. No, first non-European Nobel Prize winner. But beyond that, it doesn't mean anything. It should not mean anything. There are great economists in India who haven't won the Nobel Prize yet. Right. There are great scientists, they won't. It's okay. That's all right. Life isn't like that. We mustn't get obsessed with awards. Okay, so one last question. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Arjun.
When you say, Professor, that some of the translations, for instance, into Spanish, have focused more into turning Gitanjali into a devotional book instead of a spiritual book, for instance, and what is behind that?
You can say more, better than I can about these translations because you know them.
Okay.
Go ahead. Please tell us.
So, as you were mentioning, about this devotional or spiritual, is it spiritual or what is being devotional? For instance, into Spanish, some translations focus on the spiritual side. And actually, Tagore stood for our Second Republic, and it was the book which was taught in every school, because it was spiritual. However, after that, it was instrumentalized and it was just reduced into a devotional, and that was a sort of doctrine that was not inclusive. So,
Shamlu, you understand what's happening here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Juan Ramon
Jimenez?
Yeah, so where would you place him?
Juan Ramon Jimenez.
He's a great Spanish poet who's translated direct from Bangla Gitanjali.
Yeah, who was actually a Nobel Prize winner. That didn't matter at all because nobody reads him now because he's politically committed and he wanted a peaceful Spain. So, the dangers of a prize, as Professor said. He focused on the spiritual bond that he shared with Tagore and India. So he made that quite clear.
That's why Jimenez translations are better, I would say.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, and feel free to mingle afterwards, or you want to kind of.
Yes. Thank you, Anand. It was wonderful. You touched so many topics. I'm sure that everybody will agree that it was a very interesting evening. Yeah, I'm coming to that. Yeah. I must thank the wonderful, brilliant, and the interactive audience. All of you asked such good questions, and you all were so sporting and sang so well. Thank you so much. And thanks again, Anand, for a wonderful talk. And we'll certainly think of a suggestion of putting Tagore into the school curriculum at the earliest stages. Thank you, everyone, for coming here this evening.